Hello, and welcome back to Daily Gossip, the podcast where we usually spill the tea on the latest celebrity drama, political scandals, and everything in between. But today, grab your coffee, maybe something a little stronger, because we are diving into a different kind of gossip. This ISN and Oppos, tea about who wore what on the red carpet. This is about the absolute secret behind everything you buy. I'm talking about the stuff you are wearing right now, the phone you are holding, the ridiculous knickknacks you bought on a whim at 2 a.m. We are pulling back the curtain on the global supply chain, and let me tell you, it is juicier than any Hollywood breakup. Think about the socks you have on. Look at them. They were probably made in Datong.
Datang?
Yeah, a town in eastern China you have absolutely never heard of. But here's the kicker. Practically every step of the supply chain to make those socks is within a 15-minute drive of each other. Datong isn't special in that regard. Or rather, it is special, but it is definitely not unique. China has dozens, maybe hundreds of towns exactly like this one. One does toys. One does lighters. One does electronics. One does cosmetics. You name it, there is a town for it. Each one of these places has spent decades, building an ecosystem so deep, so incredibly interconnected, that no other country on Earth can replicate it. I don't care how cheap their labor gets. They can and Oppos touch this level of organization. Now let an Oppos get real for a second. When you, or anyone you know who dabbles in e-commerce, order a product on Alibaba, you probably think you are buying straight from a manufacturer in some massive, gleaming factory in Guangzhou or Shenzhen. I hate to break it to you, but you are not. You are almost certainly buying from a middleman. And that middleman? They are sourcing from one of these hyper-specialized cluster towns that you have never even heard of, where hundreds of factories are churning out the exact same thing. Simply put, you are paying the tourist price because you don't know the actual address. If you source anything from China for a business, or even if you are just sitting there thinking about starting a side hustle, this is the most useful piece of information you will hear all year. I am going to break down exactly how to find out which city makes what, why prices are the way they are, and how the truly savvy entrepreneurs, the ones who actually know this stuff, negotiate price and completely win the game differently than the rest of us. I have spent years digging into the underbelly of international business, talking to people who source, sell, and operate across Asia every single day. This channel is usually where we share the inside scoop on pop culture. But today we are sharing what we see from the inside of the business world. Because honestly, the drama is just as good. If you are loving this deep dive, make sure you hit that subscribe button. You won't get this kind of perspective anywhere else, and we have so much more coming your way. Seriously, hit subscribe, leave a comment, let me know what you think. Your support keeps the lights on and the gossip flowing. Alright, let's talk about a major misconception. Most people, especially in the West, think China is cheap simply because of labor costs. And you know what? That was absolutely true back in 2005. But it is emphatically not what makes China unbeatable today. The key element that everybody, from your average consumer to major CEOs, is missing is concentration. Picture a typical Western factory. You have one massive company handling almost the entire production process under one gigantic roof. Raw materials come in one end, a finished product goes out the other. That model requires an unbelievable amount of capital, expensive equipment, and massive scale to even be profitable. But in a Chinese cluster, it's a completely different ballgame. That exact same production process is sliced into dozens of tiny, distinct steps. And each of those steps is handled by many different, often small, factories or even workshops. This changes everything about the economics. It means you don't need a $1 million factory to enter the market. A person with one specific machine and one specific skill can literally be part of the supply chain. The competition in these towns is brutal. It is constant, and it pushes prices down in ways that a single, large factory in Europe or America simply cannot match. It also means that when 10, 20, or 50 workshops in the same city are all buying the exact same raw material, they are buying in volumes that completely crush the unit cost. For instance, in the Pearl River Delta, the cost of electronic components is often 30% lower than in the rest of China. Not 30% cheaper than in Europe, 30% cheaper than in China itself. And what happens when something changes? Say, a new design trends on TikTok, or there's a shift in what customers suddenly want. The entire supply chain adapts in days. The guy who molds the plastic casing hears about the new trend at lunch from the guy who paints it. There is no 6-week procurement cycle. There is no endless email chain across 3 different time zones. The information literally travels at walking speed because everyone involved is on the exact same street. The first time I really understood this, I was floored. Imagine walking into one of these towns and just stopping in the middle of the road. You wouldn't in Oppos. To understand what you were looking at. Street after street of the exact same product. Thousands of minor variations. You see schools dedicated to training people for that one specific industry. You see truck routes explicitly built to service that one industry. It is an entire, functioning town that exists for the sole purpose of manufacturing one single type of product. And make no mistake, these places did not just appear by accident. This was calculated. Local governments picked an industry, they built the roads and the power grid specifically around it, and then they let decades of relentless competition and specialization do the rest. This is the exact part that every terrifying headline about tariffs completely misses. You can pack up and move a factory. You cannot pack up and move 40 years of a deeply ingrained, accumulated ecosystem. Now, you hear a lot about Vietnam, India, Mexico. Tariffs are going up, trade wars are brewing, and companies are understandably diversifying. Every consulting firm on the planet has published some lengthy report about, in quote, de-risking, in quote, and, in quote, nearshoring, end quote. If you run a business that sources physical products, you have probably stayed awake asking yourself, should I be looking elsewhere? It's a fair question. And frankly, Vietnam is the best alternative anyone has managed to find so far. Big players like Samsung have moved operations there. Nike has moved there. But here is the catch that no one talks about. In recent years, Vietnam imported nearly $200 billion worth of goods from China. 60% of its textile exports were actually made from Chinese fabric. So, when a factory, in quote, moves, in quote, to Vietnam, what is actually moving is just the assembly line. The very last step. The massive supply chain that feeds that assembly line stays firmly in Guangdong. Then there's India. A population of 1.5 billion people and wages that are roughly a third of China and Oppos. On paper, India should be absolutely eating China and Oppos' lunch. But in practice, India produces less than 3% of the world and Oppos' manufactured goods. China produces around 35%. The gap ISN and Oppos' wages. The gap is infrastructure. Ports, roads, rail networks, power grids, all specifically built to handle high-volume manufacturing at breakneck speed. Again, you can relocate a production line. You cannot relocate an ecosystem where every single component supplier, every specialist, every logistics route has been meticulously optimized around one specific product for over 3 decades. That is the definition of a cluster. And I guarantee you, they exist for almost everything you can possibly think of. Let's get specific. I want to show you what these places actually look like from the inside, and how the people who know about them use that knowledge to pay drastically less and move infinitely faster than everyone else. You have heard of Amazon. You have heard of Walmart. Neither of them even comes close to comprehending the sheer scale of Yiwu. The Yiwu International Trade Market is the largest wholesale market on Earth. Not the largest in China, the largest on Earth. We are talking about 75,000 individual booths spread across over 6 million square meters. That is roughly the size of 1,000 football pitches, all under one massive roof, all selling physical products. People who go there for the first time often spend for full days just walking, and they barely cover half of it. There are nearly 2 million different products on display, split across 26 massive categories. If it is small, if it is cheap, and if it is sold in massive volume, it passes through Yiwu at some point. Phone cases, Christmas decorations in July, hair accessories, packaging materials, promotional items, party supplies, kitchenware, stationery, luggage. If you have ever bought something in a dollar store, it was almost certainly in Yiwu first. Every single day, around 1,500 shipping containers leave that town. The people who source small consumer goods for a living, the real professionals, they don an Oppos' Use Alibaba for this. They fly directly to Yiwu, they walk the aisles for a week, and they place their orders face to face. Because Yiwu sells everything. But Yiwu is just the beginning. The next place I want to talk about only does one thing. But it does it so incredibly well that every single piece of technology you own, from your smartwatch to your smart fridge, depends on it. Pick up your phone right now. I don an Appos. Take care what brand it is. There is a Shenzhen component inside it. Let and Appos. Rewind. In 1980, Shenzhen was essentially a fishing village. About 300,000 people. Zero industry, zero infrastructure. Then, the Chinese government designated it a, and quote, special economic zone, and quote, and just let the market in. Fast forward 45 years, and it is a sprawling metropolis of 18 million people that produces over 90% of the world in Appos. Consumer electronics. At the very center of this city sits a district called Huaqiangbei. It houses 38,000 businesses. The rule of Huaqiangbei is simple. If an electronic component exists anywhere in the world, someone in Huaqiangbei has it in stock right now. That is not hyperbole. That is not an exaggeration of how the place works. That is literally how the place works. A hardware prototype that might take 3 months to develop in Europe takes 3 days in Shenzhen. Why? Because every single component, every specialized tool, every specific engineer you could possibly need is within a 20-minute taxi ride. You don an Appos. Send emails and wait for a response. You literally walk downstairs, you buy the part, you test it in your workshop, you change it, and you test it again before dinner time. There is no other city on earth that can do that for hardware. Shenzhen is the fundamental reason why Chinese hardware startups can iterate 10 times over, completely refining their product, while a European or American competitor is still waiting for their very first sample to arrive in the mail. So, if Shenzhen builds what is in your pocket, the city right next door makes what is on your back. We've all seen it. A trend goes viral on TikTok on a Monday. Suddenly, everyone needs that specific top or that exact dress. And by Thursday, it is showing up on Shine. 3 days. 3 days from a trending video to a finished garment that is photographed, listed online, and ready to ship. A giant like Zara takes 3 weeks to do the same thing, and they are considered fast fashion. Traditional retailers? They take 3 months. That unbelievable speed comes from one place, the Pearl River Delta. And at the absolute center of it is a city called Dongguan. Dongguan has over 100,000 businesses entirely dedicated to the textile and apparel supply chain. Fabric mills, dye houses, pattern cutters, massive stitching workshops, button suppliers, zipper makers, packaging outfits, freight forwarders. Everything is within an hour in Appos. S-drive of everything else. And it gets more specific. Inside Dongguan, there is a town called Human. The Chinese government even gave it an official title at one point, and quote, China and Appos, famous ladies in Appos, where town, and quote, what that quaint little title does in Appos, tell you is that Human alone generates roughly $6 billion in apparel output every single year. The labels on the clothes might read Milan, London, or New York, but the GPS coordinates of where they were actually made point directly to Human. So, Dongguan does clothes. Shenzhen does electronics. Yiwu does everything small. But honestly, I haven in Appos. Even scratched the surface of this ecosystem. There is a town in Zhejiang called Shaotu that makes 60% of the world in Appos. Buttons. Seriously, buttons. And 80% of the world and Appos, zippers. There is a district in Zhongshan called Guzheng. 50 square kilometers, 45,000 businesses. And they specialize in one thing, lights. The town has an actual street called, and quote, Lighting Street, and quote, it runs for 10 solid kilometers. I sincerely don an Appos. Know what kind of light fixture you could possibly see at kilometer 9 that you haven in Appos. Already seen at kilometer 1, but apparently there is enough variety to fill 10 kilometers of storefronts. Foshan makes more ceramic tiles than the entirety of Europe combined. Shandong produces 75% of the world and Appos' lighters. It is absolutely staggering when you think about the scale. So, now you know these places exist. The million-dollar question, literally, is how do you find the specific cluster that makes your product? Most international buyers never figure this out. They take the easy route. They go to Alibaba, they type in what they need in English, and they pick a supplier based on star reviews and how fast they respond to messages. They honestly think they are buying directly from a factory. Most of the time, they are buying from a trading company. That trading company did the legwork to find the factory in the cluster town for them, and then quietly added their substantial margin on top of the price. The actual factory is sweating it out in a cluster town. The trading company you are talking to is sitting in a nice, air-conditioned office in Shanghai. There is a better way. And it starts with a platform that most people outside of China have never even heard of. It is called 1688.com. It has the same parent company as Alibaba. It runs on the exact same infrastructure, but it is a completely different market. 1688 is Alibaba and Oppo's domestic platform. It is entirely in Chinese, it is designed specifically for local buyers, and most importantly, the prices reflect what Chinese businesses actually pay each other. If you want to see the real deal, search your product on 1688. Then, look closely at where those suppliers are located. When you suddenly see 200 of them popping up in the exact same district, congratulations. You have found your cluster. The prices you will see on 1688 are typically 20 to 40% below what the exact same product costs on Alibaba through a standard export listing. If you want to go even deeper and really play the game like the pros, there is a specific Chinese term that professional sourcing agents use. Almost no international buyer knows it. The term is 产业带, 产业带. It roughly translates to, in quote, industrial belt. End quote. If you search your product name plus those specific characters on Baidu, which is essentially the Chinese Google, what comes back is pure gold. You will find government directories, trade association pages, and detailed industry reports that will tell you exactly which town specializes in what you are looking for. Yes, you are searching in Chinese for Chinese manufacturing information. It sounds incredibly obvious when I say it out loud like that, but you would be shocked at how almost nobody does it. They just rely on the English-speaking middlemen. And then there is the shortcut, the easiest way to see it all. Twice a year, in Guangzhou, the Canton Fair brings every single major manufacturing cluster under one roof. We are talking about 130,000 booths, all meticulously organized by industry. You walk into the toys section, and boom, the entire cluster of Shanghai is basically right there. Instead of flying to 12 different obscure cities across China, you spend a week in one place, and the clusters literally come to you. But honestly, the absolute simplest method to find your cluster costs absolutely nothing and takes about 30 seconds. Call your current supplier, right now, and ask them where their factory is. Not their sales office. Not their headquarters in Shanghai. Their actual factory. Most of them will just tell you. And once you have the name of that town, search it. I guarantee you will find 50 other factories making the exact same thing on the exact same street. That town is your cluster. And finding it is your leverage. Now you have the map. You know the secret. What you do with this information is entirely up to you. You can keep sourcing the way you always have, relying on middlemen and paying the inflated prices you and Oppo's always paid. Or you can take a step back, go one level deeper, find the actual town, find the actual factory, and find out what things actually cost before someone else adds their. This is the kind of stuff they Don and Oppo's teach you in business school. This is how the real game is played. If you love this deep dive and you want more of the real, unvarnished insider view on how business actually works, the kind of gossip that can actually make you money, you need to subscribe to the podcast. I and Oppo's am telling you, nobody else is breaking it down like this. We and Oppo's got more secrets, more scandals, and more incredible stories coming your way. So hit that subscribe button, leave a review, and definitely drop your experiences in the comments if you've ever tried sourcing from any of these wild cluster towns. I am so curious to hear your stories and see if you've experienced this madness firsthand. Until next time, keep digging, keep questioning, and I'll see you on the next episode of Daily Gossip.